welcome you all to Planet Word. We are the only museum in the country dedicated to renewing and inspiring a love of words, language, and reading, which is pretty kind of awesome, right, if you think about it. My name is Britt Oates. I am the manager of public programs here. And on behalf of myself and the entire Planet Word team, we are so excited to welcome you to today's special program, Between the Lines with Jason Reynolds and Kokayi. Yes, make some noise. Jason Reynolds is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of more than 20 books for children and young adults. He is best known for his novels, All American Boys, co-written with Brendan Keeley, the Track series, and Long Way Down, which received Newbery, Prince, and Coretta Scott King honors. Among Jason's many accolades, he was named the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature by the Library of Congress for 2020 through 2022. He is on faculty at Lesley University for the Writing for Young People MFA program, and he lives right here in Washington, D.C. You can find his ramblings at jasonwritesbooks.com. And Kokayi. Kokayi is a connector of dots. He is a preeminent improvisational vocalist, producer, multidisciplinary fine artist, Grammy-nominated MC, and the first MC to receive a Guggenheim Fellowship for music composition. He is a Halcyon Arts Fellow and Nicholson Arts Fellow, and he is the author of You Are Ketchup and Other Fly Music Tales. How about we make some noise for Jason Reynolds and Kokayi?
First of all, thank y'all for coming out. Happy Father's Day if any of you are fathers. For sure, my brother, I appreciate y'all. And thoughts and prayers for all of you who've lost your dads, because that's also a thing that we have to acknowledge. And for all of you who have been father figures, if that's you, we support and salute and celebrate you on this day too. We should probably do better with Father's Day, which is a different conversation that we can have at a different time. But hopefully you didn't get socks or a tie this year. Instead, you got a day out. You get to hang out with us, right? So it's been okay.
But if you did get socks and a tie,
look,
it's the thought that counts.
Socks are important. Socks are important. You know what I mean? It's amazing how when you get older, socks become. It's like, oh, thank you for these. I need socks, right? Okay. So look, here's how this is gonna go, and I want to give a bit of context, and I want to make sure I show some love to my brother here. The series is meant to really kind of explore the way language works in our world. I wanted to try to figure out a way to be creative about, we're in Planet Word, obviously, and I wanted to try to figure out a way to kind of push the boundary of what the word is for and how the word is used, how the word exists in our spaces and in our lives every day, how the word builds culture, or can build division. And really trying to figure that out by talking to my friends. At first, it was like, oh, I could just call all of my, fancy people who live outside of the city, or I could call all my fancy people who live inside of our city to show them some love, because sometimes people forget that DC is a hotbed for talent and creative people, and everybody thinks this is a federal district only. Right. You know what I mean? Washington.
Right.
Washington. None of it is DC.
Washington.
Exactly. So that's what you're in for. The other thing is, these are all my friends, and so this is always a casual conversation. It's never. We didn't plan anything. I just came from my mother's house and was like, all right, we're about to do the thing with my homeboy. So you're gonna get a real authentic experience about the way that we talk, and also because they're my friends, it doesn't mean that I'm still not fans of who they are, and so I'm curious about their lives and about their processes. This particular person might be at the top of that list for a lot of reasons. You heard his bio and all the cool things that he does. But what people don't know about him, because he doesn't talk about it very much, is that, one, he too is a father and grandfather, but also is that a lot of people in this city who've had a shot, if you're an artist coming out of DC, especially when I was coming up in the 90s and the early 2000s, we all pretty much had to go through him. He was almost like the best kind of gatekeeper. It was sort of like you had to kind of bump up against him. He had to kind of know who you were. If you needed some help, he was the one who would help you. If you were a musician, if you were any kind of artist, he was sort of the hub and the guy that everybody knew to look to if we needed advice or for someone to point the way. And so, my brother, though I've told you this a million times, I want to say in front of these strangers, thank you, brother. Thank you, because you did it and it's thankless. And some of these people have gone off to become superstars. And a lot of them have become very famous people, rich and famous. And sometimes we got to make sure we turn around and look back and say, thank you, brother. Thank you for fathering so many of us and making sure that we have fair shakes.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Now, the whole point of this is for me to interview you.
Oh, for sure.
Usually the way this thing starts is I think of a word that I want to kind of set the tone for like something that set this sort of energy for the event. For this particular person, this particular moment, I want that word to be release. Like release. You'll understand why as we continue to talk. And so for you to start off, when you hear that word, given who you are, what you do, how you've lived, how you continue to live, what does that do for you up here?
Immediately, I took a deep breath and exhaled, right? Release is to let go. And especially as an artist, a creative, a dad, a granddad, a person who's lived here their whole life, seen the ups and downs of the city, seen, just a lot of different things. Sure. The ability to take a rest, the ability to breathe, and to exhale, and to have a sigh of relief, right, is super important, especially with the amount of things that I have to do, right? I'm weird, absolutely. I keep a running list in my head. My wife is always like, write it down. I'm like, nah, because I'll just keep the list. Like I go through things. I'm like Forrest Gump. I'll be like, on Tuesday you got to do this, and on Wednesday you got to do this. And then life is like a box full of chocolates. And then I met Lieutenant Dan. Like it's all that stuff is there. And then we need to make sure we thank such and such. So when you feel that way, and you feel, I feel like I still have things to say, things to do, people to help, work to put out, work to make, people to connect. Sometimes you get tired. For the first time in 30 plus years, I had a vacation. Last year.
Good for you.
Last year. Not this year.
Black men deserve vacations.
Last year. And like a real vacation. I like, the two. I want to work up to, I think that Americans need to work up to the holiday experience that everybody in Europe.
90 days.
Right. The 90-day holiday experience. Because we'd be like, yeah, I went on vacation. So when you get to Paris? On Thursday. When you leave Paris? On Monday. I was on vacation. Yeah. It's like, no, that's not vacation. Like vacation is not 2 weeks.
You shouldn't come back tired.
Yeah. Right. You should, right. And so for the first time, I went on vacation, and I was 16 days in Puerto Rico. And my wife told me to go somewhere I didn't know anybody. Unfortunately, when I got off the plane and was walking down the street, I ran into somebody. I was like, yo, what up?
Of course. It's interesting, release. You were saying how, like one of the first parts you said was that you feel free. And I think, like, when you hear the word release, you think freedom. And I often wonder, I've seen you perform, I've looked at videos, I've heard the music, so forth and so on. And it always feels like a release. Like, it always feels like, it's weird, man, having known you so long. It feels like a purging sometimes. Like, it's like, do you all understand what I'm saying? Like, it's like sometimes there are people who when the microphone is here and it's their turn and the music is on, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, or if you've had it personally, if you're a singer or a performer, where it almost seems like you go into some sort of fugue state, and then there's just like a purging, right? We could even think about this, as far as like the ecstaticism in the black church.
Yes.
Where you see the same thing, right? This idea that like there is spirit that is sort of shooting out of one, beyond and without one's control, right? And so because you make music, what you have coined as spontaneous composition, Right. Can you talk to these folks about what that is, but also about like what is happening in terms of like the way language is traveling through the body, through the mind, right? But what is happening to you in these moments? And for all of you, he may do something, maybe he won't, because we're not going to put that pressure on people because it's Father's Day. He shouldn't have to work on Father's Day. You know what I mean? So we're not doing that. But if he doesn't and you want to see any of it, you should definitely YouTube it and look at what this looks like, what is happening. It is a very interesting thing to see, a mind-blowing experience. But can you talk a bit about it?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's 100% cathartic act, right? Every time I perform, every time I'm able to get up on stage, I exercise all the trauma or anger or feelings that I'm having at that moment. Not necessarily in the words, just in the fact of performance. I get to emit all this emotion at one time, right? So I feel like it's a release of emotion, pent up anxiety, anger, all of those things that go on in my head. The stage to me is that place where I could just let it all go, right? Through whatever song is happening, through whatever. That's just feeling like a third person. So the third person part of me is up there like, yeah, man, time to let it go, right? When I talk about spontaneous composition, it is literally creating in the moment, right? But we all do this every day. When we have conversations, we did not rehearse this conversation. We weren't sitting there, I'm like, so Jason, you're going to ask me about spontaneous composition. I'm going to respond. Like, we don't do that, right? We rely on this lexicon of language, and we rely on how we were socialized and how we were raised and in which communities that we exist in and all of the things that go together. And immediately, because the brain is super fast, we connect these things to words, depending on if you are multilingual, if you're polyglot, or if you have a singular language. This is how these things come out, right? Fortunately for me, I practiced rhyming words together, but we all spontaneously compose every day. We compose sentences, we compose, depending on who we're talking to, it could be a whole play, right? It could be a bunch of drama in there. It could be act one, act two of an argument. Like, we compose these things. We don't look at it like that, but we compose these things, and everything is beyond. Even if you feel like you're not a spiritual person, it's still beyond your physical understanding, because you're tapping into language and you're tapping into ideas that have existed within you for forever, and you're bringing out that idea based on, like I said, so if you grew up in Oxon Hill, I grew up in Southeast, but I could talk to you about certain things at Oxon Hill. I'd be like, oh yeah, so Slim, I was rolling down Wheeler Road. Is that McDonald's still there on the right hand side? You like, oh yeah, that McDonald's, that's the joint with Big Tim, Big Tim who looked like Bird. Like, all of these things happen in our brain, and we're connecting ideas and emotions. It's the same way, if you're of a certain generation, songs. They're not the greatest. Some of the songs that we heard in the 90s, like everybody's the golden age of hip hop is the greatest age. No, it wasn't. That was the first time you went to the dance and somebody held your hand, right? And because DOS Effects was on there, boom, stickity bum, hun, yeah. You was like, oh, this is the greatest song ever. And it's like, so that nostalgia, that understanding of the lyric at the time, that understanding of language has all of these other things connected to it. There's emotion, there's everything. It's there. It's not just the words. It's all the other things that surround it that give you that feeling. So that's what makes us fall in love with songs or movies or art. It's the other things that are there. And so when you spontaneously compose, what I'm calling it is being in the moment and sharing language with other people that don't necessarily speak your language. So composed for musicians, it's 7 notes, and their thing is based on a specific type of pedagogy as they go through school and how they learn. Are they classical trained? Do they learn by ear? Do they understand chord structure? Do they understand majors and minors and how those things fit together? Did they finish school? Like, all of those things happen, but they're speaking a language based on these notes and tones.
Yes.
And I'm speaking a language based on words. And how do we do that together without ever having to rehearse or practice?
So then first of all, as many times as we've had these conversations, I've never heard you talk about how like spontaneous composition is like everyday life, which makes a lot of sense. I guess we all are spontaneous composers, which is an interesting way to think about that, and to think about and to ask ourselves questions about the time in which we're trying to write which we're trying to like write the composition and to figure out if it's actually working or if it's helpful or if it's healthy for us to try and do so when so much of our lives is a spontaneous composition, which is interesting to consider.
Well, I feel like, so that's the interesting point, is what's the point, right? Is the point to get out the idea? Or is the point to make it something profitable? Is the point to make it something that makes sense? Or at the time, are you just really trying to excise or let or release a specific idea or emotion, or something that you need to let go of? Right.
Which would then, and I'm going to ask a question that's going to bring us down a little bit in a second, but which would then, based on the example of like spontaneous composition is for you is this particular piece of art, this thing that I'm making, but also for us is sort of the lives that we live, then that would mean that the same sort of translation from what you just said would also mean then what exactly is the purpose of our lives, and that and are our lives meant to be production driven for profit, or are they meant to sort of be these adventures that become what they become? And should I be just trying to figure out, and I've been asking myself this question a lot lately, as my mom is like, you know, your purpose in life, you want to work for the rest of your life. I said, no, I'm not. I have no interest in working for the rest of my life. And she's like, well, what are you gonna do if you quit writing or if you decide that you want to put it down? And I told her, I'm going to sit down and look around and just live and be until I'm done. And I don't know why that's not enough. Right? Right? And so when I think about like, because to me, that's the most beautiful part of like this particular, like to think about what you're saying, like you have to decide what this thing is for. This thing that you're composing, in this particular case, music, and in our collective case, life, right? What exactly are you trying to get out of it? Do you want something that is going to make you money or make you, that is going to give you what you perceive as value, which will require you to do things that perhaps makes your life a little less interesting? Or do you want to make something honest? And that could look a lot of ways and still be all good for you. Right.
And I feel like 20 days after you put everything down, you're going to start writing something again.
Of course.
Only because you're going to recontextualize the idea of writing something. Because writing went from something that you love to do to a means to earn something. And once the pressure's there to earn,
changes it, man.
It changes the whole relationship that you have with the pen and the page. Yeah. And as soon as you stop, right? As soon as you hop off the hamster wheel and you're like, bam, I had enough. Because there's plenty of people that never have enough, right? And so you're like, okay, no, there's a point where I'll have enough. And as soon as you're like, yeah, I had enough, and you'll kick up your feet and be like, man, I'm sipping coffee over here, and I'll hit you from Costa Rica, and I'll be like, what you doing? And you'll be like, man, I was in my notes the other day, and I wrote this 2-page joint just about butterflies. Yeah. And that's it's gonna make sense because now you don't really care about all the other stuff. That's the relationship I had with music for a very long time. Yeah. So I had record deals, I had all the stuff. I mean, I still, put out records and I still make music. Sure. But the idea of, am I gonna make $1 million off of making records is not in my brain anymore.
Let's go back to the beginning then. So you brought this up. So I'm looking around the room. I don't see many familiar faces, which is great because what good is it to see your friends all the time in these spaces? But I don't see many familiar faces, which means that I can assume that not many of you know who he is. Is that a fair assumption? Which is fine, by the way. That's the point of this, right? Okay, perfect. So let's tell the story. I know it's an abridged version of the story, so that people know. I'm gonna say, because were you the first?
No,
out of the city.
The first. Not the first.
The Stinky Dink count?
Stinky Dink counts.
Are you the second?
I'm not the second.
Who was after him?
It was Stinky Dink. I mean, yeah, we were kind of the second.
What I'm saying is the first people signed to a major record label from the first hip hop group signed to a major record label from DC, or the first rappers in general signed to a major. So
actually before them was if we really
we not counting. We not counting the
Junkyard.
We're not counting Junkyard.
Okay, because Junkyard was on Def Jam.
Yeah, we're not counting Junkyard.
Nobody talks about that.
We're not counting Junkyard.
Okay, all right.
So like just standalone.
So we like third or fourth.
Okay, so Kokayi and his group, which I'll let him talk about, was a part of the early wave of people actually checking for DC when it came to rappers, which is so like you have a Wale now. But there would be no Wale if it wasn't for the work that they put in 30 something years ago. So can you just tell the story about you and the fellas and how that all happened?
So grew up in Southwest on the Southeast side. That's what I like to call it, my little sliver off MLK. Me and my friend from elementary school wound up getting discovered at a cypher in DC called the Freestyle Union. So Freestyle Union was
This is what? Give the year.
This is 93, 2.
And 92. I think this is important for all of you who live in the city, especially if you've been here for the last maybe 10 years or so. What people don't know, and which we talk about all the time, is that the city was like boiling hot with creative spaces.
Yeah.
For young artists of all disciplines to get it off.
Right. So 92, we were having ciphers at 8 Rock, which was across the street from the Big Chair in Southeast. Right. So we were doing ciphers over there. Hip hop was not really accepted in DC. You was go-go. You could be a talker, which means you led a go-go band, but rapping was like, we not on that New York stuff. So, right. And so, but my friends and I, we were all into rapping. It was a bunch of students from Howard University, and then it was folks from DC that were, from here, DC, Maryland, Virginia, that would come to the city and go to these ciphers. 94, producer walks in and says, hey man, I want to make a record with y'all. We laugh him out because we like, yeah, right, you want to come to DC, make a record with who, right? Because we've all heard of these weird record deals. I had an opportunity to be on Wild Pitch when I was 18. I never did, which was a wildly corrupt record label out of New York. So we ended up going to New York, driving to Staten Island overnight, hanging out in Staten Island, go to the studio next day. Me and my homie from school, we thought we was gonna get jumped because we pulled up in front of this red door off of Ditmas Ave in Brooklyn. So we in Brooklyn off of the G train, the Ditmas Ave stop. Sure. And there's just a red door. And we pull up in front of this red door, and I'm looking at the dude in the front who was the producer, and I'm looking at my homie who's in the passenger seat, and I'm in the back seat. I'm like, how are we gonna fight out of this way? We gotta rumble. And we walk into one of the dopest studios I've ever seen called Systems 2. And in there, we start making this record. Little known guy joins us on the third day from Philly named Tariq Trotter, AKA Black Thought. And he brought his Afro friend Questlove and their manager, Rich Nichols, to there. I got my first cassette of Do You Want More from Tariq in the studio after we finished recording this record.
Which is the second Roots record, the one that made them the first real Roots record, and the second continue.
Right. So
just make sure we get context, because not everybody know what we're talking
absolutely.
About. Y'all got pens and pads, like y'all need to be taking notes.
So from there, we go on tour with the artist we were working with is a guy named Steve Coleman, who's a saxophone player, an avant-garde saxophone player, who started this collective called M-Bass. And out of M-Bass came Michelle and Danielle Cello, Graham Haynes.
Who's from here, by the way.
Everybody in
Oxon Hill's finest.
Cassandra Wilson, like all these people. Jerry Allen was in it. Like all the jazz greats that people listen to were all part of M-Bass. He was out of Chicago. We go on tour with him. Next thing you know, we made this record in Paris, a live record, and we bought another MC from DC named Black Indian, who was around 15 at the time. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Black. That's right.
R.I.P.
Rest in you. That was my man. That was my brother, Joshua Callbreath, from off Acker Place. And so we make this record. And then we go to San Francisco to do a residency for Stanford, teaching at the Stanford Jazz Workshop, and that was '97. And then we get a phone call.
Can you imagine? I mean, for you, it's all very cavalier, but I mean, you're hearing the story, right? And suddenly you're like, yeah, and then we at Stanford, right? And we just doing our thing.
And we're faculty, we faculty at Stanford.
And how old are you at this point?
I'm 25. Black is 17, and he's faculty at Stanford. Wow. So we literally in the faculty lounge for the Stanford Jazz Workshop. Like, yeah, man. So we gonna do this little the cipher, and I met Ambrose Akamusari there. All the people, like I remember when they were at the workshop, attending the workshop, and so we get a phone call from BMG France, and they're like, hey, I want to make a record, and we were like, we're not a group. And they were like, yeah, I know. Y'all want to be a group and make a record? So in the kitchen, Sub came up with the opus. I said Akabin because I was reading about Ghanaian and the Dinkra symbols. We added that, songs of the war horn. Opus meaning songs. Akabin is the war horn. We drew the logo on a napkin. He drew the logo on a napkin. We called him back and said, yeah, let's do it. And next thing you know, we were in Paris. My homie was part of Red Bull, the first Red Bull, DJ U-Rock. Yeah. And this was pre-cell phone. This is when you would call your friends and talk for like 30 seconds so you didn't run up your bill.
Of course.
He called us. He was like, man, y'all posters are everywhere. And literally when we got to Paris, we had posters all up and down where the Champs-Elysees was, all throughout the metro. We were doing the shows at their Best Buy, which is a spot called Fnac. We were in all the Fnacs and all over the country.
So you're a kid from Southeast. You grew up here. Y'all come together, and because of language, you find yourself in another country doing your thing. Can you talk a bit about sort of the power of? And I know you've traveled the world over the course of the years that follow. Can you talk about what language does for a traveler? How language, talk about what language does for a traveler.
Traveling just opens your mind. So the first time Black came with us, he was a little wild. Black was a little wild in the streets, and he was wild. He had just got shot at. Like, he got grazed the week before. We were like, Steve came to the city and was like, I need another MC. And we were like, we gotta take the youngin' out of here. His first trip, his mom had to sign over custody to Steve so he could take him on the road. Very first passport ever. For us, it was my second passport because I had been to Germany before with my parents when my dad worked for the Army. But Sub's first passport. And we're over in, we landed, we go to Palermo. We in Sicily. And for our first gig with everybody together, with Black, and we were like, oh man, I hope he can,
keep it together.
Keep it together, right? So we like, all right, man, because we had two other MCs before, and they didn't work out because they was complaining all the time. They were like, oh, the food is terrible, blah blah blah, right? So Black is over there. This literally, we hop off the plane, we like, yo, we gotta eat. We're gonna check into the hotel, and then we're gonna do this, whatever. So they dump a bunch of seafood on the table. And in the mix is like a seahorse, like a fried seahorse. And Black picks the seahorse up and he goes, man, this is wild. And he was like, I'm down. Like,
I'm with it.
I'm with it. But we get back, so we did like 30 days, we did a month in Europe, we come back home. And he calls me and he goes, Coke, I can't talk to nobody. And I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, man, I'm trying to tell my friends, like, we was in Palermo, we was by the mountain, we was in Paris, I saw the Eiffel Tower, we was in Germany, we seen, blah, 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 blah. And nobody knows what I'm talking about. He was like, so can I just call y'all and we talk?
It's a wild thing to consider. I mean, I think that, you and I talk a lot about how, we use language, but people don't know that for some of us, language has saved our lives.
Yeah.
Right? It has become the ultimate golden ticket to the world and to people that some of us from certain communities would have never seen, never got a chance to meet. Foods we had and we would have never got. Ain't nobody making no seahorse in DC.
Nah, not fried seahorse like they do.
They don't fry like they do over there.
They not frying, right? They not frying the seahorse like
my
they
mother
do
put too much breading on it.
Right. This straight Italian seahorse, Mo. Don't get it twisted.
But like I think it's an important thing to remember. I think, and for the young people here, if any of you, I know writing is hard for you. And I know that we don't always like to read. And I look at all of them looking at their parents. Because I get it. I understand. Writing is hard for all of us, by the way. Language is a complicated thing. But we are built for complicated things. And if you can get a grip of it, and if you learn the rules well enough to break them right, you can eat fried seahorse in Palermo.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? And because there's nothing about his life that should have landed him there.
No.
Except for the fact that he understood how to use his voice.
But everything was preparation.
Of course. So talk about that.
In high school, So my father worked for the Army. My dad is a Marine through and through for forever, right? But he worked for the Army, he worked for the school system there. And he took us to Germany when I was about 3. So I lived in Mannheim and learned a little bit of German. I could still do my counting and wie geht's and all that, and sprechen ein bisschen Deutsch. But I was accustomed to the world not being just Elmira Street, right? It just wasn't DC. It wasn't these 12 blocks. It was, there's a bigger world. When I was 3, I was in Germany. That was my whole thing when I got back to DC. When I go to Patterson Elementary, they're like, man, why you sound like that? I'm like, I lived in Germany. I lived in Germany. I was living in Germany. Where's Mannheim?
That kid. Everybody's like,
I live in Mannheim. Here's what Mannheim look like. They speak. I have
no one
marks.
likes that kid,
Right. Oh no, it was definitely like that too. I had to learn how to imitate my neighbors in order to make it at school, because I literally sounded like, yes, I'm great at voices because I had to listen to people to not have to fight at lunchtime. Like, no, seriously. So it'll be like, hey guys, I have Phoenix. And they were like, yeah, which was that? And I'm like, oh, y'all don't rock with the Phoenix? Oh, my bad, Mo. My bad, Slim. And then in high school, I took French. And so our first record deal is with a French label. And now I'm parlaying with everybody out in the 18th. Right, I'm like, oh, okay, we need to go to Parc La Villette. We're like, what y'all talking about? Like, it was that type of, but the preparations were there, the seeds were planted, and then you are 100% right. I didn't want to rap when I was in high school. I was the beatbox. I was like, I'm a beatbox. I can write for other people. I didn't want to rap. I didn't want to use my voice. I didn't even think my voice was particularly acceptable. I didn't think I had anything to say. But when I started working, I mean, just coming to the ciphers was amazing, because I was like, oh man, it's all these other people that are doing the same thing I'm doing. And then once we got a record deal and we were on tour and seeing all of that stuff, I was like, I can't believe people pay me to do this. Like, it was mind blowing. I was like, no, they pay. Like, you come get me from the airport. I took my kids to Paris. We had a show. We were celebrating that record. It was called Way of the Cipher. Was the record that really made BMG fall in love with us. And then they had an anniversary show for it. And I took my kids and my wife and everybody. We went to Paris. And they were like, oh, okay, all right, Dad. You know, my son was like, all right, okay, Dad. You know, we're going to get to Paris, and then what's going to happen? I was like, well, they're going to pick us up from the airport. He's like, oh, so you got a limo? And I was like, no, it's like a van. It's a little Sprinter van. They go, oh, so we got a limo. I was like, no, it's not a limo. It's just a van. It's going to be somebody in a van.
If you got a driver,
you got a limo. Right. He was like, nah, it's a limo. And then he was like, Dad, you don't really speak French. You don't really know about Paris. Like, my daughter was like, oh, yeah, here we go again with the stories about Paris and you used to be here so much. And so we get off the plane. The guy's there first, and he picks us up, and I'm speaking to him in French, and they're like, oh. Like, what did he say? And I'm like, he was just saying welcome, da-da-da. Yeah. Then he's speaking to them in English, and they're like, people in France speak English. And I was like, yes, they do. In fact, probably better English than a whole lot of people who speak English.
That's like, sure.
And then he was like, hop in, we gonna get in the limo. And I was like, no, it's a van. So we get in the van, he's like, we got a driver.
Exactly.
And we're driving into the city. And then, me and the driver talking, I was like, oh, dude, don't take this exit. You should probably take the next exit, because that's going to take us right to Port-au-Prince and right into the joint. It'll be better, and the traffic going to be crazy. And my kids are like, oh, no, you like know where you're going.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, like I was like, dog, I done drove this same hustle like for 20 years. So, yeah, I know exactly where I'm going.
What has music and language taught you? Like, my theory is that we could be like, so like we try to make sure our young people and all of us are literate when it comes to like reading usually and like writing. But literacy is more than reading and writing. There are lots of different literacies, right? And so my question is, how has travel and music and language made you literate as it pertains to like humans, right? Because you've seen the world, you've been all over the place. How has this? How have you better learned to read human beings?
The unspoken spokens, right? The unwritten writtens. it has made me very interested in culture.
Yeah.
So culture to me is like, it's all the other stuff. It's not just the written language. It's not just the words. It's like, what? Well, how do people prepare food? Like, what are the rituals when they eat? Yeah. What are the rituals when you greet one another? What are the rituals when you go out to dinner or when you drink something or hold the door for somebody or not hold the door for somebody? Like, what are the rituals when you walk in the house and you better not have them shoes on? Like, why am I kicking off my shoes and putting on these slippers? Why are there 18 pairs of slippers? Why are there slippers for each other room? Like, it's all of the things, the other things that are the unspoken spoken. And I am not in my country.
Right.
So I'm always a guest somewhere else and I need to act accordingly. And the ugly American happens. The ugly American thing is super, super real. Very real. And in fact, it's so bad sometimes. And I'm, you know, for everybody who's American here, check your privilege and your Americanness at the door. Just remember you're a guest, please, please, please. Because I run away from tourists when I'm in other countries. Like I'll be like, let me find a word that I can speak that makes it so I'll be like, yo, no say. It's just about, like, I'm going straight to, I don't know. Sorry, I don't speak English. Pardon me, that I do not speak English. I do not know. Because I don't want to be, I was in the Parisian subway. We were trying to go to the Eiffel Tower. We walk up, there's a sign on the thing. I do not speak English. In English. I do not speak English. It had a picture of a ticket equals €1. Un billet equals un euro, right? But it's in English. It's written. I walk up. I'm like, I pay for my ticket. S'il vous plaît, merci. I'm out, right? Boom. Get ready to hop on the joint. Group from Texas is right behind me. Can I get a ticket, please? I'm like, yo, son. He points at the sign. Sorry, I do not speak English. Yeah, but can I get a ticket? I was like, come on, dog. There's a sign. It's written in English.
There's a sign.
There's a sign in English. Like, just read the sign.
Just read the sign.
It's there. It has a little flag, an American flag on it.
This is
like,
for you.
For you. Like, all the context clues are there. Like, all you have to do is read the sign. Like,
yo, it's
that thing, and that has helped me travel. The Middle East was the most expansive because of the propaganda that we receive here about other countries, about Islam, about Judaism, about all of these places. I swear, I got to Jordan. I was like, yo, can't go to the bar in Jordan. They was like, come out to the Blue Fig. Have a tequila. I was like, but I'm in Jordan. I'm not supposed to do this. I'm not. Why is this an illegal bar? It was like, Jordan, are you tripping? We got bars. Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah. Didn't know I could go to the bar in Jordan.
You realize you don't know nothing.
I know nothing. Yeah. I'm clueless.
I always laugh when I'm in Germany. Tell all my German friends, I'm like, you do know that most Americans think this is Russia, right?
Right.
People
Exactly.
have no idea what Germany is.
Like, what are you doing? Right. They're like, Germany, ooh.
It's so interesting. It's funny. Thinking about all of this in culture, I heard something profound years ago. I can't remember. I wish I could cite this person. I don't remember who told me this, but they were saying how they were like, to them, they were like, culture is any group of people who have been either misplaced, displaced, or oppressed or enslaved. Whatever they had to do to survive is culture.
Wow.
Like whatever they had to implement,
right,
to make it through is what builds culture, right? Is what culture is,
for sure.
Which is a fascinating thing. And I think language specifically, though not the only element of culture, is the cornerstone of it, because we have to put names to everything, and we have to create codes for everything so that we're not oppressed again. And so now I want to take a few minutes to talk about slang.
Yeah.
And to talk about how you use slang in your everyday dialect and lexicon, but also in the music, how slang doesn't always have to be a word. Because sometimes I think when I listen to your music, that it's even slang the way you're bending the words and bending the sounds of words, that even that is a kind of slang, right? It's Michael Jackson's he is not right. It's an ad lib.
It's a vibe,
but it's something that we know it when we hear it.
Exactly.
Therefore, it counts.
It's like when I go to Philly and they like, you're.
Exactly.
Like,
or if you
really
know anybody from
heard.
Brooklyn and they start,
it's all the same. I mean, I make up my own joints. Like it's old Jones. Just so we're clear, there's a difference between joint and John, right? And John.
And John. Yeah.
So for the Philly people, it's John. For the DC people, it's John. For the correct people, it's joint.
It's joint. Yeah. Pens and pads, everybody. Next time you come, pens and pads.
Pens and pads. Because young is a young.
Yeah. Oh,
but young doesn't
changed.
But young doesn't right. Oh, listen.
Champ has changed.
Champ has changed. When I heard Champ and my son was like,
we got to get some context. We have to get context.
Champ, back in the day, Champ was like champion. So it'd be like, hey, what's up, Champ?
Everybody
like that was a good thing.
Champ. Yeah.
Champ was great. You'd be like, hey, what's up, Champ? Champ, you good, Champ? Like, and
very DC.
And you good has different connotations. Yeah. So you good? It's like, are you okay? And it's like, oh, you good?
Like you want to fight me.
You good? Yeah. You good, Champ? Yeah. Like you good? Yeah. Like, but then my kid was like, yeah, Dad, that's Champ. I was like, what do you mean that's Champ? Champ is a who? Champ is not a what?
Champ is a
who? Champ is not a what? What do you mean that's Champ? How are you saying that's Champ? Like peanut butter can't be Champ. Like what does that mean? Like,
but it can be.
But for the youths, Champ is bad.
Champ is bad.
It's horrible. Like Champ is like, nah. That's
same with Dub.
Dub,
like which is more New York, but like Dub, when we were coming up, was for W for a win.
A win.
And Dub now is for a loss.
A loss, right? And I was like, how do you do that?
The slippery nature of language, right? But like young or youngin and all the things like Joe. Now Mo.
Well, see, Mo and Joe, well, you know, they both were at the candy store. If you get that, but the Mo and Joe thing, like that, for most people outside of DC, that's their reference. They're like, yeah, they call me Joe or Mo, and I'm like, yeah, you haven't been to DC in a long time because you probably slim, young, dude, like you, the Ock, or whatever you want to be. Like, there's plenty of other things you could be. So if you were Joe and Mo and you tell me you 30, I'm telling you you're lying.
You're lying. Right? Yeah. And if you go to Baltimore,
you're 45.
If you go to Baltimore, they're gonna call you dummy.
Dummy, right. And dummy can be a term of endearment.
It can be a term of endearment. They call everybody dummy. It's like a term of endearment.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's like, what's up, dummy?
What's up, dummy?
Right. I can't even do the Baltimore thing.
I'm not, you know what I mean? But,
I'm not even going to purport to do the Baltimore thing. Because the two blue shoes got me.
Plus, we don't want to fight. You know
I don't want to fight nobody.
We don't want to fight. That's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other convo. I love everybody and dance music and the whole thing. Baltimore Club.
So I do want to talk about what you make though, because I know we're talking about all kinds of stuff, but because we got about 5 or 6 minutes before we take questions from you, also get your questions together. But I do want to talk a bit about what you make and how you make it and how you're using language, and if you've ever not been able to find a word, how is this connected to jazz? Who are you in? There's a lot of questions, but
I got you.
Who are you in conversation with? Right, like these are the things that I would love for you to just spill on for a minute.
So when I look at who I'm in conversation as a vocalist, I think of Joe Henderson, Mingus, and Gene Owens from the Three Sounds in terms of melodically. That's how I like to approach stuff. I don't look at stuff as a vocalist. I don't look at things as a rapper, even though I'm an MC to the core, right? I'll battle you in a heartbeat. Please don't get confused. But I chose to be a vocalist as, prompted by Steve Coleman. He was like, man, you should use your voice more. So he was like, rhyming is one thing. He was like, but if you can rhyme the key and the change, that's way different.
Yeah.
So you become more of a vocalist. I was the first MC to be at the Village Vanguard, to be able to perform at the Village Vanguard because Lorraine didn't like rappers. She was like, no rappers are ever gonna be here. So they changed it. They were like, he's not a rapper, he's a wordsmith. Doink.
The power of language, right? The power of language.
He's a wordsmith, doink. And then so I was able to perform, but she came up to me afterward. This was like a week before she passed away and was like, I love you. I love what you do. And I love how you interpret the music and move that way. So that's who I find myself musically and musicians. And when I think about what I do, I look at myself as a horn. I look at myself as the melodic instrument. My job is to interpret. So in a lot of different bands, I play with Terry Lynn Carrington, Nate Smith. I work with Ambrose Akamusri. I used to work with Steve Coleman. And in those iterations, Terry, I wrote a couple songs, but 90% of my job and everything else is to create these compositions on the spot. So the freestyle, right, is to freestyle and interpret what they're implying. Because whenever most people are like, oh, I like jazz, but it's not really any words. It's that situation. I'm the word person. I'm like, yo, I think they're implying pain. So I have to create a narrative around pain and pull from my own experiences or pull from things that I read or pull from conversations
on the spot
that we have, and I create it fresh on the spot. I don't remember anything. So that thing of the conduit thing, that's how I look at myself. I ask to be empty. I ask God to empty me before I hop on stage. When I get up there, I'm just like, whatever the information that's coming is coming through the song, and I interpret on the spot and I leave.
Which brings me back to my first question and sort of lands the plane for us, that it does feel like ecstaticism. It does feel like the Holy Ghost.
Yes.
And specifically in the Black church, right?
Yes.
The traditions of the Black, it feels like that. But with jazz and with this sort of particular musical texture. My last two quick questions, and then we're going to open it up, is number one, pie in the sky, right? You've been around a long time. You've done a whole lot of things. You've accomplished a lot. You got a whole lot of respect. You've been disrespected, right? A little bit of all the things. And so pie in the sky, what, if there's one thing that you just haven't gotten to yet, or you haven't been able to accomplish yet, and we stripping away all ego, we stripping away all insecurity, all like, I'm not supposed to say that, right?
Oh,
like,
no, I'm definitely gonna say exactly.
Yeah, so like,
I mean, we Sagittarians. I mean, I'm gonna say exactly what I feel.
You know what I mean? I know people be like, I shouldn't say that. I really should. I should have been one Grammy.
Mean,
you know what I mean? But like, I want you to get it
pie
off.
in the sky,
like,
literally,
pie in the
dude.
sky?
I want to win the Grammy. I want to win the MacArthur. I want to be the first rapper to win the MacArthur.
Word.
Straight up, like real talk. Thank you. And have the one tour, like the tour, he headlined the whole thing. Cause I've been with everybody. I've toured by with groups and done all the stuff. I did 50,000 people in Basra in Mauritania with me and a DJ. So I was like, man, if I can repeat this, that's the one. I want the tour. I want the win the Grammy. I want the MacArthur. I want all the things.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And my last question before we open it up is, I've asked probably 75 people this. Whoever I interview, I ask this question to as the final question. If you could go back to young Kokayi, who you were as a young person, let's say around the age of 10, and you could go back to that time, what would you thank that kid for?
Wow. I would thank that kid for not quitting. Yeah. There was a lot of obstacles. Yeah. And I ain't quit. So
good on that. All right, y'all. Give it up for the homeboy. Okay. Now we have some time for some questions. We got some time for some questions. Put your hands in the air. Please, you can ask anything of either of us. And
we're passing out mics along the sides.
I'm one of those that just came to DC. I'm under 10.
Yeah,
I had no idea who you were, brother, but you're very profound. I appreciate this opportunity.
Welcome to the town.
Thank you. That last point you just made about talking to your 10-year-old self that you never gave up. Can you talk a little bit about that experience of growing up? You talk about growing up in DC and what that really means. I'm an acting superintendent in another state at school, but we're always talking to our young people about, keep your eyes on the prize and keep moving. Can you just dig a little bit deeper into that last statement?
For sure. When I was 8, I tried to kill myself. So I suffered from depression. There was abuse in my house. There was chaos, a lot of chaos. Not a lot. I mean, it was a 2-parent household and a bunch of siblings. And I tell everybody, it's worse being surrounded by people who say they love you and not feeling loved at all, right? So being in a house full of people and still feeling like don't nobody love me. And so the obstacle was 2-part. It was literally my house situation, and then my mental situation of like, how am I gonna make it? And it was literally the grace of God. It was literally like still finding sources of light. Mr. Grogan, who was my piano teacher, who taught me how to perform, basically. Mr. Grogan was like, look, man, don't pay attention to these other people. Get out there, get on stage. If you messed up. They don't know if you messed up. Keep it moving. I cite Mr. Grogan as often as possible. Love Mr. Grogan. It was uncles, it was cousins, it was my big brother who was my beacon for a long time. And my sister Bean, who's no longer here, who was like my protector, and helped raise me for sure. She taught me French, she taught me calculus, she taught me advanced AP English. That was the smartest person I know to this day. So yeah, but I learned to adapt coming back from Germany, learning to adapt to my surroundings, recognizing that the world wasn't my block. I think that's the advantage that I had over a lot of other kids, is because I had been to Germany and I did know that there was other places. And when I was in Germany, I used to look up the flags to other states, to all the states, because I wasn't in the United States. I was like, oh, my grandparents live in New York. What does the New York flag look like? So I could identify all these other spaces and places because I knew I wasn't from there. I was from somewhere else, whether that was outer space or somewhere else in my own mind, right? But I was from somewhere else. And coming back to DC, even though my whole radius, because where I grew up, everybody was black except White Mikey, who lived across the street, and that was his nickname, White Mikey, whose grandparents never left, right? So white flight happens and his grandparents never leave, and Mikey's the only little white kid that live on our block, right? And I can go 8 blocks in every direction, everybody black, mailman black, policeman black, everybody black. And this was old Chocolate City, DC, where everybody black, except for White Mikey, who lived across the street, and his grandparents.
In Georgetown.
In Georgetown, right. So it was still, even being in that environment, I still felt like I was from somewhere else. I didn't sound like everybody else. I didn't speak like everybody else. And I had these experiences of, I remember going to Berlin when the wall was still up. I remember having to pass through parts of Soviet Union occupied territory, and them saying, if you look out the train, we'll shoot. When I was in there with my brothers and sisters and we were traveling to go to Berlin, being in Heidelberg and Frankfurt and Stuttgart and all these other places when I was wee years old, and finding pictures of that years later and being like, oh wow, like not even remembering, but feeling like I was from somewhere else.
I think it's interesting. It's such a good question, and especially for the job you're doing and do. Because I think that we are always grappling with our external environment, but we're also grappling with our internal environment, which can also be a gauntlet. And I'm glad that in 2024, we're a little more open and to talk about it. And I also suffer from lots of things, anxiety being the most prevalent. And it's just talk about release as this, right? Like that we're in a space now where we feel a little more, it's a bit more, I feel like it's more possible for me to release the stigma attached to mental illness, and to have conversations, like his sort of ability to say the things, right? Which, for those of you in the room who potentially was triggered, we apologize. But it is an important thing to be able to say the things out loud, because I think a lot of young people that you serve, there's a lot of things happening that they don't always feel like they can say out loud. And so what we typically do is we figure out ways to talk about like the neighborhood stuff that's going on, and like that's important, but these kids are dying a death every day. And unless we're able to really kind of get at that and to be compassionate and to create language, right? If we can create language around it, then we can save some lives. Cool. Any other question? Yeah.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and to Kokayi and Jason. I have a comment and a question. Well, I'll start with the question first. The question is, when did you embrace you being unique and your own personal perspective? Because I think the work that you both do is important, and then also piggyback off of the superintendent, the gentleman up here. And you were talking about how the young kids, they don't write or they don't read, but I think that was because they didn't necessarily see themselves in the stuff that that they write and or read, and not really embracing being vulnerable and being able to kind of release these things. But so I just want to commend you on your YA novels and Miles Morales and everything. And I feel like every time I converse with you two, it's like going to church and listening to you. It feels like it's like you're speaking directly to me. But just to go back to the original question, like how do you tap into the younger population and I guess get them to understand that their perspective is unique and to speak more on that?
You're the king of unique.
I didn't think I was unique for a long time, and then I realized one day I was shiny, right? And that there was no shame in being shiny. And sometimes the shiny thing happens to us and we don't even know it, right? For so long I would just, that whole hide your light under a bushel thing, that was me. I got all the bushels. I was under them joints. Like I was like, we not special. I felt fortunate. I didn't feel special, right? And then it took me loving me, right? Getting to a place where I could literally look myself in the mirror and be like, oh man, I love you. To be okay with being different, to be okay with being weird, and to be okay with the choices I was making. Because musically, I could make all sorts of choices. I could have shot up plenty of people in my songs or sold plenty of drugs in my songs, but I chose not to do it. And I knew what that would mean. I knew that would mean it might not be as successful as other people, but could I do it? And I was like, nah, I couldn't do it. I can't do that. So I just have to be weird. I like to make happy, sad songs. So that's one of the things I make really happy sounding music about something super, super sad. And I'd be like, no, you can dance to it. It's my trauma. Yay. Like, but I feel like you can find like joy in some of those things, right? It's like, yes, it sounds really sad, but you need a way to laugh at it, or a way to find something to dance to it, to enjoy it, because so many people are trying to sell you trauma and make you dance to it and make you laugh about it. So why not just share my own personal experiences, and hopefully somebody can find some joy in that.
I was fortunate too when I was a kid, and I always tell young people this: I have friends, like real friends. Yeah. Real friends. And what I mean by that is, like, I had friends who were like knuckleheads, but I was an art kid. And so when you're the art kid, by default, you're the different kid, right? It's like, oh yeah, Jason got on some weird clothes, Jason on something else, right? And we trying to do this, and he is definitely over there, right? But they were young men. I had young men in my life who were my age who allowed for that, created space for it, right? They almost created a force field, because they were like, oh nah, he gonna be the one to get out. He out of here, right? Jason growing wings. And so we gonna make sure that we sort of pin him in so that he has the space to do that safely. So if there was something going on, it'd be like, nah, you don't come, because this not for you, right? You keep writing your poems and working on what you got going on. When I started performing, I remember coming down U Street in like 98, 99, so come down, there's a spot called Bar None. And so before Alero and all of that was there, that was just a parking lot that we parked, everybody parked their cars in. And across the street where Pure is now was a spot called Bar None. This was like, first of all, that whole area was just like, I feel for the people who weren't here for this time. My brother, you just got here. I apologize. But like that whole area was just, it was like walking down Haight-Ashbury. Right. It was like just a time where you could be in any day of the week. You could be at any of these spots, and there was a spot open every day of the week for you to hear live music, poetry, whatever else you wanted to do. Specifically coming from the young black people of Washington D.C. Right. So I used to go to this spot called Bar None. I was too young to get in. They'd give me a special wristband, tell me sit in the back. Now all my friends would come too to hear me recite my poems, and these guys would be like, "Hey, look, we all gonna stand in the back, and when it's your turn, we're going to fold our arms and we're going to grill everybody in here, because they better clap for you. We don't know what you talking about, right? But we love you, right?" And so because I had that in my life, it gave me an opportunity to get to answer your question. It gave me an opportunity to explore myself freely. There's never been a moment in my life where I did not feel like a free black boy. In a world that has done a whole lot to make that, to sort of end that and to clip these wings, I had these people around me who were like, oh, nah, you get to go ahead. Whatever you're going to try it, and we're going to create space for you. And maybe we'll tease you, but most likely we'll just be like, oh, okay, Jay, like if you say so, and let you get it off. And by the time I was 18, 19 years old, I was solid. solid, because I knew for a fact that if nobody else loved me, I had these 8 dudes in my neighborhood who would go to war for me if anyone tried to make me anyone other than myself.
Right.
And I'll forever be grateful. For all the kids in the room, you only need one good one. One really good friend, kind of friend you can stand in front of and cry. Yep. Especially for my young men in the room. If you can't stand in front of your brother and cry, that ain't your friend. That ain't your friend, right? And so that was my story. So perhaps we kind of in like sweet situations in that way, but the advice is still the same advice. These youngins gotta get you a real friend, and if you, I know the populations that we all serve. So the one thing I always tell the youngins who are living on the knife's edge is, hey, I know snitching is a big thing in our community, right? Not snitching, right? All I'm asking you is to make sure that your brothers would tell on themselves before you go down for them. Yeah. Make sure they love you enough to tell on themselves so that you don't have to take their numbers if y'all get into something. The kind of man who will hold themselves accountable are the only kind of men you should love, right? And so I frame it in those ways for my youngest who are living in a specific way so that they understand, like, check your friend. These ain't your friend. These ain't your brothers. If they let you take the rap, and then they say, don't snitch, that's a coward. Right. That's not your man, right? Because my friends would say, no, Your Honor, he got a whole future. Right. It was me.
It was me.
I did it, right? And so these are the kind of conversations that we will have when it's family business time to have them, which is not right now, as you know. Right. But these are conversations that we have to have in our communities. For sure. Thank you for your question. Good to see you, bro. Any other questions?
I like writing poetry and I'm planning on like writing something and like publishing it. Mm-hmm. But like, how do you encourage yourself to just like keep writing and like not stumble while you're like stumbling through like the hard parts? Yeah. Like how to just like not give up, because like that's been like really hard for me.
That's the hardest part. Here's what I'll tell you. My advice to you. So first of all, you should know this. I go through this every day where I'm like, I should probably go ahead and hang it up. I should probably go ahead. This is too much, right? This is too much. I should have chose a different talent, right? But what I will tell you is the best thing you could do for yourself in those moments is free yourself from the fear of writing badly. See, the issue that some of us have is that we're just afraid to make something that's not good. But the secret is everything you make, the first version of it, is not good. But you got somewhere to start, right? It's like, so then you can start to fix it, you can add, you can subtract, you can change it, you can rework the poem, you can do all these things. But don't ever be afraid of writing badly. I'm never afraid of making a mistake on the page. Right, and because of that, I have no problem just making up words if I get stuck, or moving to another section of the poem, and trying something down there, or starting from the bottom, and figuring it out, or maybe moving it to the other side of the page, to the right margin, and figuring out what that looks like. Maybe the shape of something might help. Also, reading will help to shake some things loose as well. All right. Any advice on it? I mean, you're spontaneous.
I was about to say it's the same thing in every other discipline. Yeah. So if you make music, it's the same. If you paint, it's the same. Yeah. Whatever type of creative. And people that say, I don't have a creative bone in my body, I don't create anything, you don't want to hear me sing. Everybody in here sang when they were like 2 or 3.
And
everybody had crayons. Everybody was doing something creative, and the only reason you stopped is because somebody said it was bad. Somebody said it was bad, and so then you said, oh, I'm not a singer. Somebody said it was bad. Oh, I don't write. Oh, I don't dance. I don't do this. It's bad. Because somebody else said it. Not you. Somebody else judged you for it, and you took their judgment as fact. So I would say it doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. It's you. Like my son published his own thing. He didn't want to publish it. We took it and just put it out. We was like, hey man, you want to do a book? It's your book. Like you wrote all this stuff. We just go put it out for you.
Sure.
Because it's like, why not?
Why not?
So yeah, just, we all suffer through the blocks.
Yeah. It's just part of it.
Yeah.
That's how you know you a real writer.
Exactly.
Right.
That's how you know you real.
All right. Anybody else? So here's the rule. Here's my rule. if no one else has a question, when this is over, when we're done, don't come up here and be like, oh, real quick, Jason, I got like one quick question for you. Right. I'm telling y'all now, it's now or never. Don't come to me. In the back.
Question
okay.
in the back. Here we go.
Exactly.
Don't save it up.
Hi, thank you. So I hope I can articulate this, but one of my questions is, how do you keep yourself loose? Like, you're pulling in from above, you're pulling in from being an outsider in all these different spaces, and then trying to articulate it and pull it down. So you're up here probably a lot of the time, and you're trying to keep yourself grounded. How do you stay loose for being in those moments of pulling that down and projecting it out?
I want to know this. This is my question too. Like, how does this happen? How do you stay loose?
I get, first of all, my ego checked at the door. Like, I'm like, people be like, you got an ego. I'm proud of what I do. I'm competitive at what I do. But the ego part, I'm like, man, because I look at it all as it's a gift. So if you got this gift, right, which is something that you didn't earn, you just were given this thing, then why are we making ourselves into this whole big whatever, right? You living up to all this, whatever anybody else is saying about you. And then it's like, stop judging yourself. Leave yourself alone. Right? Leave yourself alone. A good friend of mine told me that one time. He was like, hey man, can you take the foot out your butt? Like, can you stop? Like, leave yourself alone. Give yourself a break. Because we know all the secrets. We know every small thing that we don't like about ourselves. We know how to judge ourselves better than anybody else. And what we'll do in moments is start to pick ourselves apart.
And that what you call it? You told me this a while ago. Analysis paralysis?
Analysis paralysis, man. We'll start going and ruminate. We'll ruminate on all the bad. We'll ruminate on all the secrets that we know. We'll ruminate on how we're not good enough, right? Because those little thoughts are always there, right? They stay there. They hang out. They're in the back. They're like there's a new thing. There's something in the dark. It's a cartoon for kids. But it's about this ghost. It's a boogeyman. He's like, well, I'm the dark, And that's how your thoughts often hang out, the negative ones. They hang out in the back, and they're just like, yeah, we'll just wait for you to feel like you're on a high, and then, right? And so it's like, no, you're once you step up somewhere, you are already good enough. Like, you're good enough. You already wrote it. You already put a book out. You're good enough. You picked up the pencil. You put it on a piece of paper. You did the thing. I look at performing like that. People are like, oh, how do you perform? I'm like, other people admire what you do because they don't feel like they had the audacity to get up there and write, to get up there and speak, to get up there and rap, to get up there and sing, because that makes you vulnerable. And the best thing about being vulnerable is I don't really care what you say about me. I'm just trying to be vulnerable. So why do I care about what anybody else has to say? Whatever you got to say, I probably judge myself 5 times as harder than you could anyway. So the thing about staying loose is just like, I give up. Like, there's certain things I can control, and there's certain things I can't control. I can't control what anybody else thinks about me. Yeah. Can't control it. So
release. That's my mother always says, it ain't your business. Like, people's opinion about you ain't your business.
Ain't your business.
Mind your business. Like, whatever they think about you is their business. That is not your business. I will say this on my side as a writer. When I sit at the page, all of my selves come to the page with me.
There we go.
And that gets tricky, right? All the dark, right? All of it comes, I sit down, they all sit down.
Yes.
And so part of my process is take some time, first of all, I gotta figure out how to get some of them back, right? The ones that are insecure and the ones that are traumatized and the ones that are afraid and anxious, right? I try to sort of wrestle those back the best I can. And try to pull forward the other ones, right? It's like, all right, well, I know that in order for me for me, writing is play. It has to be. Now, it doesn't mean that it feels like play all the time, right? But I have to approach it like play, which means that and I mean this literally, that if I'm starting a new story, when I put my fingers on the keyboard, the first 5 minutes, my fingers don't seem to be able to know the letters on the keys on the keyboard. Though I've been doing this job for 25 years, right? I'm like, man, I really don't know how to type for the first 5 minutes of a new story. right? And because of all the selves. And then there's a moment where I fight everything back and I remind myself that this is supposed to be play, and it literally feels like loosening up my hands. Literally feels like my fingers are looser, and suddenly you just don't care as much because you know that because you've been faithful to the process would be faithful to you if you just lean in a little bit and just let it go a little bit, release some of the tension and stress of it all. It's helped. The other thing I'll tell you is sometimes it requires me to get back to the most human thing I can do. Right, and what I mean by that is I go back to sort of a different kind of tactility. So for me, if I can't loosen up, I just pick up a pen and a pad. It's amazing what happens when we do the thing that is the most analog. I know technology is meant to make our lives more convenient, but the truth of the matter is that it is inhuman. And so the moment that we can get back to things that are at least more human, it's amazing what you will do as a human to be human. You feel me? And I think so. Like for me, I just break out the pen and a pad and I get busy. It's so much easier to write with a pen and a pad than it is. You know what happens when there's a backspace button right here? Ooh. You'll never get anything done because you click, 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 click. But pen and pad, shoo, you just keep it moving. Right? It's a very different rhythm. It's fluid in a different way. The staccato of this is very different than the legato of writing.
And practice, especially if we talking about craft.
Practice.
Right? We talking about practice, right?
Yes.
So, right, if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. So you stay loose because it's muscle memory at that point. Yeah. You practice enough. Like I work on, when I first got my first synthesizer, my prayer was, God, if I get enough money for this synthesizer, I'm making beats every day. And to whoever get mad about me making beats every day, so sorry for you, but I'm making beats every day. And I did that. I practiced that for a very, very long time. So my process was super simple, right? It was like, oh, okay, you just load the thing up, bing, bing, boom. I could do a little 5-minute joint, and then I can expand later. So I just get out the quick idea first because I'm practicing all the time, and then I'll expand later. Same thing with freestyle, same thing with rapping, same thing with writing.
Yeah. And we got 10 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this really thought-provoking and kind of mind-blowing conversation. I want to know what your favorite word is right now.
Oh, so I'm working on this thing. So, and the title of it is my new favorite word, which is incarnadine. And incarnadine, does anyone know this word? This is like for the real nerds. This is like
I was like spelling bee.
Nah, this is like some like
spelling bee, dog.
This is like nerd stuff. Incarnadine is a word that is like loosely rooted in the word incarnate, right? To be made flesh. But what it actually is a color. Oh wow. And it's the color of. There's a few different versions of it, so like it's tricky, but usually it's used to say the color of blood. So like Shakespeare uses it in Macbeth, basically, and he says like Shakespeare may have made it up, honestly, because he's made up half the language that we speak. I think it's one of his words. He says so and so incarnadines the green sea, which basically means she puts blood in the sea. You know what I mean? She puts red in the sea. So incarnadine, I can't tell you why I'm so fascinated by it because there's a book coming out and you'll learn it then, right? Why I'm so fascinated by it. But it's been like just at the front of my mind for the last year or so.
Eponymous. He got a new record out, by the way. Right. Well,
shameless
it's coming.
Plug.
It's coming. Right.
It's coming.
No, but that's why it became my favorite word because somebody was like, "Oh, you want to do a self-titled record?" And I was like, "What's another way to say that?" And it was like, "Oh, eponymous is the way to say it."
Oh, is that?
Yes, it's self-titled. It's just the eponymous Joan is the self-titled Joan. That's what the title of the record is.
The title of the record is the eponymous Joan.
Right.
Eponymous is a good word.
It is.
You are a self-titled person.
Yes.
Yeah. You are an eponymous person.
Thank you.
Perhaps we all should sort of strive toward that, right? Is there a eponymicity? Is that what that would be?
I don't know.
We should look up what the
We can look it up.
eponymicity is what
It's
we.
just like when I found out genii was actually a word instead of genius.
Yeah.
Multiple. I just everybody's a genius, but isn't there two eyes at the end? And I was like, it's really different.
Yeah,
That's why English is one of the hardest languages to learn because stuff doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. Like octopus, the plural is not octopi, so you should all stop saying that.
Right.
It's octopuses. It's octopuses. It's octopuses.
Right. That's the plural.
Which is complicated, but
It doesn't make any sense.
But that's what it is.
Right.
It's
So
all about what the. Anyway.
Right. We shouldn't be mad if somebody says matifuses because
it's true.
It's octopuses. So
it is octopuses. Is it mice or Mises?
Mises, right.
I'm gonna say, in this context, Mises.
Mises, right.
All right, any final question? Last question before we get up out of here. Yes. Now you all know how much that you all are nerds too for coming to this and sitting here this whole time.
Right.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to say Happy Father's Day, especially to this beautiful person next to me.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Look at you, brother. Hey, brother, she touched your head. She rubbed on your head.
What I love. Physical touch is my love language. But I heard you say you were Sagittarius gang gang.
Gang gang.
I really just want to know when your birthday is.
December the 8th.
Okay, November 30th. I see you, friend.
December the 6th, December the 8th.
Oh,
and
so
yeah, both of us.
Collectively. Gang gang.
Gang. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you leave here and ruminate on the things you heard. Also, I hope you tell your people, tell your friends what's happening down here at Planet Word. Not just this, but Planet Word as a space for the city. I think this is a gold mine that the city has, that we're the only city who has this, and I think we need to spread the word. The other thing is spread the word about this event, this series. There'll be 2 more left in the year. And if it picks up steam, we rocking. But I'm having a good time just hanging out with my friends and introducing them to some folks who may not know who they are right here in your backyard. So thank you for coming. And have a great rest of your Sunday. Shout out to Ann Friedman, the great Ann Friedman.